We are stronger and better when we work together, the three of us.
The United States, Canada, and Mexico together form a group of countries with often divergent views and issues. However, on a global scale, geopolitics and business can unite even the fiercest enemies quite quickly. And here is the question of what would happen and whether it is possible for these three North American countries to ever unite with each other into one big superstate or North American Union. Despite appearances, this is not a vision that is as unrealistic as it might seem. Some experts consider this scenario not only realistic, but almost certain. Since at least the mid-19th century, numerous concepts for a union between Canada, Mexico, and the United States have been proposed, some of them involving countries in the Caribbean, Central America, and even South America. Such a movement was the North American Technate in the 1930s, which advocated a nationwide merger of all the countries you see now. This would give global domination of raw materials and technology, based on the rich oil deposits in the Gulf of Mexico and the Venezuelan region. On top of that, this creation would have almost the world's largest gas reserves located in the US and Canada. But that's just a short list of what this union would have at its disposal. A hypothetical unification of all of North America, including Mexico, the US, and Canada, would create the most powerful country in the world, with which no one could compare for the next few decades. According to estimates for 2021, the US population is about 333 million people, Canada's population is about 38.2 million, and Mexico's population is about 130.2 million. That is a total of 501 million people united in a $26.5 trillion economy, almost 50% more than China.
This trilateral relationship is so impactful. We are stronger and better when we work together, the three of us.
Today, despite the fact that the countries of North America are not a single superpower, they are nevertheless united by a free trade agreement called NAFTA. This agreement was signed in 1994, reducing tariff and trade barriers, while it is currently being replaced by the USMCA agreement. The military, economic, and population rivalry between the United States and China may significantly deepen North American cooperation in the near future, but much also depends on Mexico, whose favor is also increasingly sought by China. That's why I decided to check for you in this episode. How realistic in the near future is the plan to create a North American Union, similar to the one in Europe? Is it possible to create a new American superstate? How the relations between these countries and their cooperation look today. We will also look at how strong militarily and economically a united America would be. You will find the answer to all these questions by watching today's analysis to the end. So let's get started. I have a huge request to you. We have just launched this channel and we would like our videos to reach as many viewers as possible. For this, we also need your subscriptions and thumbs up. If this is not a problem for you and you want to be part of our community, then just do it. Now it's time to continue. The US-Canada border in the form of this long straight line is called the 49th parallel. It stretches 8,891 kilometers and has been called one of the world's most peaceful borders. Nevertheless, it is itself problematic for residents of both countries, as it crosses areas where the population and economy are highly integrated. Plus, at times it is difficult to distinguish which side of the border one is on, due to its inadequate marking and lack of connection to the real terrain. The penalties for such illegal crossings can be really severe. Some communities are separated by the border and have difficulty moving between the two countries, as well as accessing some public services. For example, residents of the town of Boissevain, located on the Canadian side, complain that they have to drive 45 minutes west to reach the nearest major city in Canada, instead of taking advantage of the services and products offered by cities nearby on the US side. In a similar way, residents of the neighboring town of Dunseith, North Dakota in the US, have trouble getting to hospitals and other public services because they are located on the Canadian side and require crossing the border. Despite this, the US and Canada have jointly taken action to take out unidentified objects over Canada in the event of their appearance, and the two countries are cooperating militarily on NATO issues. So yes to military, no to human relations and the economy. Meh, bravo humanity. In the South, on the other hand, there is a completely different problem. The border is literally one big strip of various fences, walls, observation posts, and patrols combing the area to catch illegal smugglers from South American countries. Add to that, of course, the mutual distrust exacerbated by immigration issues, as well as the not-so-distant disputes over the wall.
I believe the steps we will take, starting right now, will improve the safety in both of our countries. It's going to be very, very good for Mexico. A nation without borders is not a nation.
However, the growing power of China and the new vision of the world of authoritarian countries in the near future may change, or rather, unite all of North America. Such steps have already taken place in the past. Serving as a political advisor to Vicente Fox's presidential campaign during Mexico's 2000 general election, Mr. Jorge Castaneda, influenced by the ideas of U.S. academic Robert Pastor, who advocated deeper NAFTA integration, encouraged Fox to include in his campaign an initiative to unite the continent on the style of the European Union. The late Mexican president appeared on several U.S. news programs advocating greater integration, including a plan to open the U.S.-Mexican border within a decade.
No two nations are more important to the immediate prosperity and well-being of one another than Mexico and the United States.
Some in the United States saw this open border proposal as a call for the creation of one big super country. Some Americans as well as Canadians at the time supported the initiative, while others feared that they would have to pour money into developing Mexico, which heated up the poorer part of society in the backward province. To some extent, these fears may indeed have been looking at the wealth of the various states in the Americas. Economically, the South was significantly lagging behind and continues to lag behind the North. But much has changed in recent years, as I will prove to you in a moment. The then Mexican president Vicente Fox also proposed a plan for U.S. President George Bush and the Canadian Prime Minister that he said would move the North American continent toward an economic union along the lines of the European Union. Fox's proposal was rejected by President Bush in 2006. Perhaps then was the best time to do so, as this would have saved the entire world from the 2007 to 2009 crisis, as banks would have taken less credit risk in the context of potential economic changes throughout North America. There is evidence, however, that this plan was seriously studied by both Washington and Ottawa. A diplomatic dispatch from January 2005, which was published by WikiLeaks in 2011, contains a discussion by U.S. government officials on the best approach to North American integration, based on an assessment of Canada's views. The dispatch suggested a new North American initiative that would pursue goals in the areas of security and prosperity through incremental measures, saying such a proposal would get the most support from Canadian policymakers. This later resulted in another agreement involving shared security and increased economic cooperation under the 2011 USMCA, but it's still an initiative far from a viable union, let alone a vision of a single superstate. And here we come to the question of whether this would be worthwhile in this day and age, and whether it is even viable in the coming years. Let's look at the data on the map. The new supercountry or union could be named after the abbreviations of Canada, the US, and Mexico. That is, it would be CANUSMEX. Globally, it would be the most powerful region, which geopolitically would change the international balance forever. As I mentioned above, a total of 501 million people would live here, which would rank it third in the world just behind China and India. But the prospects for population growth by 2050 could push the population to 620 million people, which, with China's depopulation trend, would almost bring the two countries to equal numbers. CANUSMEX, however, would have a significant advantage in the availability of key resources. According to available data, the United States produces the most oil in the world. On top of that, it also produces the most gas, the most food, has the third largest reserve of water, which is becoming a key resource, dominates additionally in gold production, and ranks top in other mining and manufacturing areas as well. So far, the argument raised threatening the idea of unification has been Mexico's weak economy, but that per capita is estimated at $10,000. That's not much worse than China. The United States can count on $70,000, but that's a figure pumped mainly by New York, California, and Texas, while Canada's is $52,000 per capita. Thus, one can see quite a gap between the South and the North. However, looking at the European Union in the context of Eastern Europe when it was decided in 2004 to add Poland, the Czech Republic, and the rest of the countries you see on the map, among others, Western Europe was also worried about problems. Ultimately, however, the emergence of the less developed market of Eastern Europe not only developed it itself, but also gave a boost to the West, which in the case of Germany resulted in a growth of the German economy of almost 35%. The United States, wishing to continue in its role as a global hegemon, should keep this in mind. However, for the past 2 decades, ruling teams have been doing their best to wall themselves off from Mexico in the South, a huge threat that China is shrewdly exploiting by establishing itself in South and Central America, where there are already a growing number of countries that have a larger trade balance with the middle state than with the much closer United States. So the gigantic riches that lie beneath Canada and the US would easily make it possible to cover the costs of bringing less developed Mexico into CANUSMEX. But it would be harder to explain this to voters and people who are also mired in poverty in the States. According to data released by the United States Census Bureau in 2020, the poverty rate in the US was 9.1%, meaning that about 29 million people lived in poverty. However, Also taking into account people who are simply poor, these figures are severely underestimated. Only 50% of Americans can actually afford a good standard of living, such as we observe on Instagram. Joe Biden continued the strategy of then-President Donald Trump. Well, according to the new regulations proposed by Biden, the United States would generally deny asylum to migrants who show up at the southern U.S. border without first seeking protection in the country they are passing through.
My message is this. If you're trying to leave Cuba, Nicaragua, or Haiti, or have agreed to begin a journey to America, do not just show up at the border. Stay where you are and apply legally from there. Starting today, if you don't apply through the legal process, you will not be eligible for this.
This topic was discussed with Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who met with Joe Biden in early 2023. The Mexican leader also expressed a desire for closer continent-wide cooperation, which clearly indicates that Mexicans have not abandoned the vision of creating something like the European Union. So rejecting the vision of a so-called One America is irrational, all the more so when looking at another important factor. According to the United States Census Bureau's 2020 data, about 62.1 million people of Hispanic or Latino origin lived in the United States. This includes people of various Spanish or Hispanic origins, such as Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Colombians, Salvadorans, Guatemalans, Peruvians, Ecuadorians, and many others. In the United States, the Spanish-speaking population is one of the fastest-growing ethnic groups, and by 2050, it will even be about 35–40% of the total population. Washington from immigration will not defend itself if it wants to compete with authoritarianism, and these changes are also needed in the context of the military. With the unification of all three countries of the continent, the Army would have 1,700,000 active personnel and expenditures would reach $820 billion. By comparison, the Chinese army has 2 million soldiers and expenditures of $252 billion, so hypothetically a North American well-organized army with additionally better equipment and deposits of new recruits from Mexico, who have so far toiled in illegal Karelian activities, would for a long time prevent authoritarianism from achieving global domination. The South, however, as mentioned above, has a huge problem with crime and cartels, and Mexico is actually divided into spheres of influence by individual gangs. Currently, the U.S. together with the Mexican authorities are trying to solve this problem, but there is still a long way to go. Nevertheless, production from China is just moving to the Mexican states. Recently, such a step was decided by, for example, Apple. The United States and Canada, if they want North American strength, need Mexico, and Mexico wants to cooperate with them. Nevertheless, the country's second-largest trading partner is China, which is increasingly bold in its attempts to interfere in local frictions and in its attempts to dominate the foreign investment sector. In the event of the emergence of a pro-Chinese government, there will be a real threat to American interests. For the moment, this is not possible, but this option in the future cannot be ruled out. To sum up, in the coming years, the United States is likely to face China over Mexico in terms of broader integration and business. While the main issue now continues to be migration, so much so there are indications that it will soon become a secondary topic to global concerns in the context of peace or climate issues and availability of key elements for development. Let me know what you yourselves think about the vision of a single North American superstate. For my part, that's it. Thanks for today. Stay tuned. Cheers.